It is Tellabration celebration of the Texas Storytelling Association. And I look around the room and I think most all of you are either in a guild or in the Tejas Storytelling Association, which is dedicated to supporting storytellers and listeners. And we do this through the storytelling guilds online and across the greater Texas region, offering performances, workshops, in our annual Texas Storytelling Festival, which will be March 12th through the 15th in 2026 in Denton, Texas. And you can find out more about that at tejasstorytelling.com. Tellabration, if you noticed in the promotional material, has a little TM because it is a trademark term. In 1988, Tellabration was born. This event, dedicated to storytelling and story listening, was the brainchild of J.G. Pinkerton. J.G. was a board member of both the National and the CT Storytelling Organization of Connecticut, as well as a CT storyteller. His vision was to create a fundraising event that would also introduce new listeners to storytelling. And the first year Tellabration took place in 6 towns across Connecticut. The following year, Texas and Missouri joined in producing Tellabration. Since that beginning, Tellabration events have been held across the United States and around the globe. Venues have included public parks, public libraries, theater stages, senior citizens centers, and now even all over on Zoom virtual events. Wherever a Tellabration happens, audiences discover the delight of story listening. Tonight, we have a number of storytellers from the guilds throughout Texas and the region. Our first teller is David Thompson, an internationally recognized storyteller who captivates audiences of all ages with a diverse repertoire that includes ancient tales, obscure historical events, magical legends from around the globe, and original stories. His contributions to higher education have also been highly valued by students and teachers alike. As an avid storyteller representing the United States, he was invited to the Second International Storytelling Festival in Marrakesh, Morocco. David shared authentic stories of the American West, challenging common Hollywood portrayals. He collaborates with fellow storytellers from around the world. As an active member of the Tejas Storytelling Association, David is dedicated to promoting the art and wonder of storytelling, firmly believing that storytellers serve as the memory keepers of the people. With his rather gentle humor story, he is going to share with us Ahivela. David Thompson.
Thank you. And it's not really humorous, it's real touching, let me put it that way. Hey, Viveca. This story, since we've just come from Veterans Day, this story is that I have, it's an original, and it is dedicated to the 3,000 to 5,000 Pacific Islanders who fought with the Allies in the Pacific Theater. And there is a part in here. Well, never mind. We're not going to do the call and response, so I'll just do it that way. This is the story, Ahivela. Little Janie Kamea. Oh, she was so grand. She lived on the grand island of Oahu. And this was before Hawaii was a state in the United States. This was when Hawaii was still a protectorate. And on that island where she lived, Oahu, was Pearl Harbor. Now, she lived away from Pearl Harbor. She lived back in the area on the other side of Honolulu itself. And she was so grand. She loved her brother Kimo. Oh, Little Janie was 9 and Chemo was 17. So there was a space right there, and they adored each other. They played together. And Chemo did not mind that he was hanging around with his little 9-year-old sister. But I tell you right now, they had a monthly happening. She and Chemo, Janie and Chemo, would walk together holding hands, and you'll sit down by the lagoon, and they would sing a song together. Ahivela okuiki ao aho ao Yahweh iluna lo aho ke aho kohukai mahana ikelani, and they would just laugh and sing and have a grand time and walk back much later. Well, things were going quite well. Things were doing very well for little Jeannie Kamea. And she came home one day and she wasn't certain what was going on. She heard the radio going on in her home, and her mother and her father and Chemo was sitting there listening, and they heard, "It is a day that will live in infamy. Today, I have asked Congress to declare war on the Empire of Japan." And they just looked at each other. Said, "Oh, what? What's going on? We don't understand." Mama and Papa, they knew what was going on. And they had to explain to little Janie and her brother Kimo what was happening. Oh, well, her brother, being 17, said, "I'm going to join up and fight." No, no, yes, I am. I have to help protect my island. I am going to join and we will fight and we will win. And little Janie just hold on to Chemo so much. She says, "Don't go." No, she says, "I must go. I must go, Janie. I must." So it was that Chemo left the next day on a bus to get to boot camp. Now, days went by. They finally heard from him, a short letter. "Oh, Mama, Papa. Oh, Janie, these people are strange. They don't understand what Ohana means, because we know Ohana means family, and family means no one is forgotten, no one is left behind. However, that's who they are, and I have to understand where they come from." And so it was. The days went into days and went into weeks and into some months. And finally he came home and he says, "I ship out tomorrow." "Well, where are you going?" "We don't know yet. It's high secret, top secret. We have not been told. But I leave tomorrow morning. I came to say goodbye and I will be fine." And Janie, every full moon that we are able, let us go together and sit at wherever we are under the full moon and sing Ahive la Okuiki Ao Aho Ao Yahweh Iluna Lo Aho Ke Aho Kohukai Mahana Ikelani. And Janie was crying because her brother was leaving, and she hugged him, oh, so tight. He said, "I must go, I must go, I must go." And they stood and she waved as the bus went into the distance. She waved. Well, life went on as much as possible. And Janie was like, okay, okay. She has her good friend, little Emmy Nakamura, who lives across the road, and they play together and they talk. But one day, Janie came home from school. She had not seen her friend Amy, and she saw Amy sitting out front, holding herself and rocking and crying. And she went running over. "Oh, what's going on? What's happened? What, have you had bad news?" And she said, "Oh, Janie, Janie, Oma and Opa, they live in San Francisco, and they were rounded up by the army and they were taken away, and we don't know where they are. We don't know where they're going. Oh, I'm going to miss them." And Janie just held on to her so hard and said, "Remember, please remember, they are Ohana, and Ohana means family. And family means no one is forgotten. No one is left behind." And so she sat with her friend until her friend stopped crying. and was able to take deep breaths. And Jeannie says, I must go home now. So she goes home. She tells her parents what happened to her friend's family. And her parents looked at each other and said, we had heard this. We have heard this. Days went into days. Days went into weeks. Weeks went into months. One day, Janie was coming home from work and she heard a loud wailing coming from her home. Oh, what was going on? Oh, no. And she runs in and there she saw Papa holding Mama as they were both sitting on the floor rocking and crying. Janie went, oh, what happened? What? And her father handed Janie a letter. And she read it. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Kameha, we regret to inform you that your son, Chemo, is missing in action. We do not know where he is. We're trying to find him. Please keep your hope up. Please pray for us. Secretary of Defense signed it himself. Days got gloomy after that. However, every full moon, she'd kept her promise to Chemo. And she would go out to the lagoon and look up at the sky and ahive la okuiki ao 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 Yahweh, hoping beyond hope that her brother Chemo was doing the same thing. Months into a year into a year and a half, they still had heard nothing. But every month she would go out, little Janie, to the lagoon and she would sing their song, hoping beyond hope that Chemo was able to do the same. 1 year moved into 2 years. 2 years moved into 3 years. And Janie had this deep feeling in her stomach. She said, this may be the last time, but I'm going to go out and I will sing for Chemo wherever he is. So that evening when the moon had risen above the lagoon, Janie walked to their place and she began to sing. Ahivela okuiki ao 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 Yahweh. And then a voice, Iluna lo aho ke aho. She turned around and there he was. Chemo had been found. He's back and she ran. Oh, careful, I've been injured, careful. Oh, okay. You can let go now. You can let go. And she says, come, let us sing together. Have you been doing? I said, I had been doing what I could do. But yes, let's go sing. And they went and they sat on their rock. And little Janie began to sing, Ahive la okuiki. And Chemo said, hey, do you want to hear what that is in English? Yeah, what is it? Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder what you are, up above the sky so high, like a diamond in the sky. Ahive la hokuiki, ao ao ao, Yahweh, iluna lo aho, ke ha ho, kohukai mahana, Ikelani. Aloha.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. We appreciate your contribution to today's celebration. Our next teller is Sara Evans, a member of the board of the Tejas Storytelling Association. Sara Evans is an associate professor in the College of Information at the University of North Texas. She serves as the director for the Children's and Young Adult Librarianship Program and the Storytelling Program, and as the co-director of the Multiple Literacies Lab. Dr. Evans holds a bachelor's degree in drama, a master's of library and information science, and a doctorate of philosophy in learning sciences from the University of Washington, as well as an elementary education certificate from West Washington University. Her story today is Val and Leo by Sara Evans.
My grandmother had eyes that sparkled. You could always see a little bit of mirth and just a tiny bit of mischief in her eyes. Now, my cousins and I knew her as Nano, but she was born Valda Alice Weigel in 1918. Her family lived in Seattle, and she was the third of 6 kids, 5 girls and 1 boy. Every morning before school, her mom would stand at the bottom of the stairs and shout, "Midge, Tita, Val, Nettie, Della, Kicker, come on down." And those 6 kids would tumble over each other and run down the stairs, pushing, laughing, sometimes arguing. Val didn't want to just be known, though, as the third Weigel gal, as they were called. But she turned out that she had a skill in sports, and she became quite the sportswoman. By the time she was at Garfield High School, she played basketball, baseball, volleyball, field hockey, and she ran track. With all those sports, as you can imagine, she had a lot of friends, and she had 5 siblings who also had a lot of friends. And so the Weigel house was never quiet, much to the despair of their mother, but the secret delight of their father. There was music and laughter. Occasionally, the Thomas boys would come. They lived down the street, and Leo was in her class, but he had serious eyes, and he was rather quiet, so she didn't have much to do with him. But his older brother, Leo, he had eyes that sparkled too, and there was definitely some mischief in them. She hoped that sometime they could get to know each other better. She graduated high school in 1936, and she wanted to stay in sports and keep active. In fact, every day she went to the high school and ran around the track. But that summer, she started to notice that she tired more easily, and her lungs were starting to feel tight after every run. When her chronic cough started, her mother said she needed to go downtown to the county health department and go to the free clinic to get a test. And sure enough, she tested positive for TB. Tuberculosis, of course, is very, very contagious, and she still had 3 little siblings at home. So she was given a place at Furlan Sanatorium, 35 acres, up 12 miles north of the city limits. At that time, there was no cure for TB except rest, and still more rest, as the medical director informed her on her first day there. They put her in a bed in an airy room with about a dozen other patients. But she wasn't allowed to talk or read or write or even cough except once a day in the morning so that the doctors could test her cough and see if she was improving. She wasn't even supposed to reach over her bed to get a glass of water. Coming from the Weigel house with so much noise and joy, it was so quiet. It was too quiet. Even as she got better, she was still restricted in what she could do. The nurses would quote the doctors and say, "All that is not rest is exercise. Don't stand up if you can sit down, and don't sit down if you can lay down." So there she was, mostly just wondering what was going to happen to her. They did allow visitors, though, on Sundays and Thursdays from 2 to 4, adults only. And so her older sisters and her parents took turns visiting her on Sundays, but they were busy in the weekdays. On Thursdays, nobody came, which surprised her. Where were all her friends? All these people she spent all this time with. It seemed like everyone had forgotten her. And then one Thursday, she was surprised to see Leo Thomas, that serious boy from down the street. At this point, Val wasn't really supposed to be talking very much, so she wondered if it was going to be an awkward visit. But it turned out that Leo could tell stories. He told her stories of diving into Lake Washington with his friends to find coins and other things that had fallen off the luxury ships there, and how he jumped on the rails at age 14 and spent the summer touring the country. He was full of so many stories and dreams. He wanted to fly a plane someday. He filled her head with ideas and her heart with love. When the doctors finally decided it was time for her to return to society, Leo was there waiting. "I've come to take you home, Val," he said. And he did. They were married in 1938, and soon they had a little girl, Sharon, and they had 3 years of cozy laughter in their home that was just nearby their parents and her siblings. But in 1941, war came to America and to Seattle, a coastal town with military resources. It felt very dangerous and very real. But everyone wanted to do their part. Leo got to fly his plane of his dreams. He became an Army Air Corps officer and was a co-pilot on B-24 stationed in the South Pacific. And even Val's little brother, he, with parent permission, was able to sign up at age 17 and became a tail gunner in a B-17 over Europe. And the Weigel gals were not going to be left behind. They took up the factory jobs that the men had left behind. Val even learned to be a master electrician, fixing lamps and light fixtures. Every day, she'd drop her little daughter Sharon off at her mom's house with the other cousins, go to work, then come and get Sharon, get home before the citywide blackout. After her daughter was in bed, Val would think, "It is so quiet. It is too quiet." She wanted her husband, Leo, to come home. One of the bright spots that she did have during the war years were the movies. When Val could go to the movie theater and watch the screen, she could let all the fear she had for her husband and her family and her country and her world just roll off her as she saw those stories. In fact, she and her sister Tita had worked out this scheme. They would take their lunch hours at the same time, but rotate the starting time so that between Monday and Friday, they could actually, over the lunch hours, see an entire movie. One day, they were enjoying a movie at the very end of it on a Friday when Val heard this whispering sound, and she realized the usher was coming down the aisles and tapping on each woman. He finally got to her and said, "Are you Valda Thomas? Would you please come to the lobby with me?" Val immediately thought of her daughter. "Is something wrong?" No." Really awkward teenage usher. "But could you come to the lobby with me?" Val said no. She was determined to finish this movie. The usher dejectedly stumbled away. But it wasn't 2 more minutes before he came back. "Ma'am, will you please come to the lobby with me?" "No," Val said. "I have paid my ticket. I'm going to finish this movie." "I'll see what's wrong." So her sister went with the usher. And 2 minutes later, she was back. "Okay, Val, you really need to come to the lobby." "No!" Val was determined. Her sister went back to the lobby, muttering something about mules. Then, a couple minutes later, the lights went on in the theater. People started murmuring, and then they started gasping. Val turned around, and there was a soldier. He was skinny, and his skin was very dark from tropical climes, but she saw his eyes, those serious eyes that she loved, and she knew Leo was home. As she ran to him, the theater burst into applause. And he whispered in her ear, "Val, I've come to take you home." And he did. I'm really grateful that I grew up where I had a family where everyone told stories. I heard all of Leo's stories and his adventures, 25 years in the Air Force, and my Nano's stories about being an officer's wife. And it's her stories that have been the ones that comfort me and give me direction when I feel lost. And when she passed away a few years after my grandfather, the thing that comforted me the most was the story of the movie theater. I imagined her passing to the other side and finding herself in that movie theater again. The lights come on and she turns, and there's Leo. And he says, "Val, I've come to take you home." And he does. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sara. Our next teller is Warren Holleman from the Houston Storytelling Guild. Warren grew up in a farming community in North Carolina, pretending not to listen to the stories told by his father and other old folks. Nowadays, Warren is one of those old folks, and he enjoys retelling their stories plus a few of his own. Warren lives in Houston, where he is a 3-time Moth Story champion. His stories have been featured on the Moth main stage, the Moth Radio Hour, and PBS's Stories from the Stage, as well as the New York Times best-selling book, A Point of Beauty, True Stories of Holding On and Letting Go. The story he's telling today is both serious and funny, and is the name of a famous quarter horse who came from the part of Texas where his wife grew up. With his tale, Go, Man, Go, Warren Holleman.
Thank you, John. Hi, everybody. I'd like to share a story that my father-in-law told me. His name was Burl Klein. He was a rancher and a livestock veterinarian in Southeast Texas, Brazoria County, going all the way back to the 1950s. These were, of course, the glory days of Texas ranching. So Burl had lots of great stories. The one I'm about to tell you happened in 1959, and that's an important date to remember because that was the height of the Cold War, a time when nuclear tensions were high with the Soviet Union and also with the Soviet Union's new ally, Cuba. And now I'm going to put on my father-in-law's hat and do my best to tell the story just the way he told it. I think his hat went something like that. This here's a story about Fidel Castro, only it didn't take place in Cuba. It took place right here in Southeast Texas. And it didn't involve no politicians. It involved a veterinarian. His name, Frank Mann from Wharton. One Saturday morning, Frank was taking his younger cousin Billy fishing. They loaded up the truck, hitched up the boat, and headed south for Matagorda Bay, about 60 miles away. They were halfway there, talking about wade fishing and speckled trout, when all of a sudden Frank said, "Dadgummit, I plumb forgot." He pulled off to the side of the road, and Billy said, "What's wrong?" Frank said, "I promised Johnny Ferguson I'd go by his ranch this morning before we went fishing and issue health certificates on his horses." So, now you may not recall who Johnny Ferguson was, but back in the 1950s and 60s, everybody knew Johnny Ferguson. He was the most famous horse rancher in the world, at least the most famous quarter horse rancher. He had this one horse, Go Man Go, who was the fastest horse in the world 3 years running. No horse before or since ever did that. And Go Man Go was an unusual color. He was a strawberry roan. So he stood out on the racetrack even before the race began. And Go Man Go had this feisty personality. He was known around the world as the fiery roan from Texas. Now, Frank Mann loved Matagorda Bay, But on this particular Saturday morning, he pulled a U-turn and he headed back up to Wharton. Now, when he got to Johnny Ferguson's ranch, he started examining the horses and filling out the health certificates. Young Billy was just a teenager. He didn't have nothing to do, so he just hung out in the barn and he was looking at the pretty horses and breathing in the sweet smell of fresh cut hay. After a while, who should walk into that barn but the man himself, Johnny Ferguson. Now, Johnny was drunk, he was angry, and he was cussing up a storm, and he walked right up to that boy and he started unloading on him. And you know how that is. They'll get in your face and talk like this, and you're sort of leaning back like that. Johnny Ferguson said, "I can't believe the stupid thing I did. A year ago, I promised Fidel Castro I'd give him a colt out of Go Man Go. At the time, I didn't know that blankety blank Castro was a blankety blank communist." And then Johnny Ferguson took his finger and he put it on Billy's chest. He said, young man, what do you think I should do? Should I give a prize colt to a blankety blank communist?" Billy didn't know what to say, so he just said what was in his heart. He said, "Well, sir, all I know is what my parents tell me." "What's that?" "Well, a promise is a promise, and a man should keep his word." Johnny Ferguson said, "Huh." And he stared at Billy a couple more seconds. And then he turned and walked away. 30 years later. 30 years later, Johnny Ferguson was dead. Go Man Go was dead. And Johnny Ferguson's daughter was living in East Bernard. It's a little community just down the road from Wharton. One Saturday afternoon, she got a knock at her door. A well-dressed stranger said, "Ma'am, you don't know me, but I represent the Methodist Church, and Dr. Frank Mann suggested that I come and talk with you. So he suggested I tell you my story. It's a story that involves your father." So she invited the stranger in. They had a seat in the living room. And the stranger said, "Ma'am, there are two missionaries, a couple, a husband and a wife, from our church in Houston. Years ago, they went to Cuba to help the Cuban people. But now they find themselves stuck inside a Cuban prison where they've been for years. We've done everything we know to get them out, but to no avail. They're only there because Cuba is a communist country. Dr. Frank Mann heard our story, and he told us his story of how your daddy once did a favor for Fidel Castro. Ma'am, do you think you could be some influence to help us bring those missionaries home?" Johnny Ferguson's daughter said, "I don't know about that, but I'll try." Now, Johnny Ferguson's daughter's name was Joan Ferguson. And of course, by this time, she's married, Joan Ferguson Attaway. She got on the telephone, a landline, of course, and she dialed 0, which people my age know stands for operator. The operator in Houston connected her to the operator in Miami. The operator in Miami connected her to the operator in Havana. The operator in Havana connected her with the office for Fidel Castro. And next thing she knew, Joan was talking to the secretary. She introduced herself and said, "Ma'am, could you bring Mr. Castro to the phone?" "I don't know," she said, "but I'll try. This may take some time. Be patient. Don't hang up." Well, 40 minutes later, a man with a booming bass voice came on the phone. It was Mr. Castro. Joan said, "Sir, my father once gave you a colt out of Go Man Go. Do you remember that horse?" I sure do, Castro said. She was a red roan and she had a strong personality. She reminded me of myself. I had a stable of 300 horses at the time, all excellent horses. But your father's horse was my favorite. She's the one I rode in the big parades and ceremonies. She was a wonderful animal for me. Joan said, well, sir, we have a problem and we need your help. Our church has 2 missionaries who have been stuck inside your prison for many, many years. We've done everything we know to bring them home, but we have failed. Sir, could you help us get them out of prison? Fidel Castro said, today is Saturday. I will call you back Monday morning with an answer. Monday morning, the ladies were sitting by the phone, and at 10 a.m. it rang. It was Mr. Castro. We found your missionaries, he said, and they will be freed. The ladies could not believe their ears. Did you say they would be freed? You have my word, Castro said. On Wednesday morning, they'll fly from Havana to Mexico City. They'll change planes, fly to Houston, and they're scheduled to arrive at 3 p.m. Intercontinental Airport on flight so-and-so. On Wednesday afternoon, the ladies went to the airport, and at 3 p.m. on flight so-and-so, the missionaries got off that plane, just as Mr. Castro said they would. Now, I don't know what you think about this, but I think it's just amazing how that happened. And it's more than amazing. It's a miracle, really. It all started because a veterinarian gave up a fishing trip to keep his word to a client. Then a boy had the courage to speak his truth, even to someone as intimidating as Johnny Ferguson. And because that boy spoke his truth and that veterinarian kept his word, Johnny Ferguson kept his word to a man he didn't even like, Fidel Castro. And because Mr. Ferguson kept his word to Mr. Castro, 30 years later, Mr. Castro kept his word to Mr. Ferguson's daughter. And those missionaries came home. If that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. Some folks think miracles are caused by supernatural forces up there in outer space. I've seen quite a few miracles in my day, and most of them weren't caused by that. They were caused by people, ordinary people, just like the people in this here story. People who kept their word and treated other people right. If you can do just that, I believe you'll see miracles every day, and you'll make the world a much better place for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Warren. That was a
Thank you,
wonderful
John.
story. Our next teller is Jaye Mclaughlin from the Tarrant Area Guild of Storytellers, also known as TAGS. Stories are made to be shared, and Jaye R. Mclaughlin loves to share the myriad of stories she has gathered. The history of Texas, of our nation, of Native Americans, along with folklore of animals and people are just some she can pull out of her bag of stories. She brings a native flute to play, other objects that can delight the young listeners. Jaye retired in 2005 after 22 years as a children's librarian at the Fort Worth Public Library. She has sojourned in Nebraska, Kentucky, and now Texas. Jaye has 4 grandchildren and several grand dogs and cats. She shares a conservation story with us today titled 1962, Swimming in the Grand Canyon. Jaye Mclaughlin.
Thank you so much. I'm so delighted to be here. The rest of that is Swimming in the Grand Canyon, a story of a battle of words and paper. On January 21st, 1963, David Brower, the executive director of the Sierra Club, flew to Washington, D.C. to talk with Secretary of the Interior, Stuart Udall. He wanted to make a last-ditch effort to stop what he had unwittingly started, and that was the filling of the Glen Canyon Reservoir. But he was told that the secretary was busy all that day, and there was no time to talk to him personally. But he was told that the secretary was at an important press conference with the commissioner of the Bureau of Reclamation, and they were having the press conference on the Colorado River. He was welcome to attend. He did. At the press conference, Bauer heard the plans of providing water to California. But then the next thing he heard was about the Arizona part of the Grand Canyon. Secretary Udall said, "This is a golden opportunity. There's plans to build 2 dams within the Grand Canyon, and these dams will provide water and electricity to the cities of Tucson and Phoenix. And the government could sell the electricity it created to many different companies in the area and be able to pay off that cost of building the dams." As he spoke, he saw Brower standing in the back of the room, scowling. He did not know that his announcement moved Brower to anger and action. David Brower called his friend Martin Litton, and he told him what the plan involved. And then David invited Martin to come to the May 1963 Sierra Club meeting, where they would be deciding whether they should support the 2 dams or move against them. Litton came. Well, Mr. Robinson opened the debate. He said the Grand Canyon is not going to be filled to the rim. No. There are just 2, and the 2 reservoirs the dams would build would not even be able to be seen from the rim. So we don't need to oppose this. That's no problem. What we need to do is we should go ahead and support the dams, and then maybe we'll get a say in what can happen in the recreation on the reservoirs. I mean, maybe we could build an elevator down for fishermen to go and fish for blue ribbon trout in the trout fisheries down there. I mean, what fun! And this would be so great. And then Mr. Litton, he had a map of the Colorado River written in marker on a grocery box, and he carried his box up to the podium. And he started with quoting President Roosevelt's speech, part of it, when he came and delivered on the south rim of the Grand Canyon in 1903, and the Grand Canyon became a national park. Leave it as it is. Do not mar this wonderful grandeur of nature. You cannot improve it. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. And then he showed on his map where the 2 dams were to be built, the Bridge Canyon Dam and the Marble Canyon Dam. He said, it doesn't matter a hoot of difference if you cannot see the reservoirs from the rim. The river is the essential part of the place. It's its heart. The thing that has carved and shaped the rock, but has also sustained the unique and fragile ecosystem at the bottom. The spirit of the place would vanish, and what would replace it would be a poor substitute. That's what he told him. He was the only one in the room who knew what he was talking about, too, for he had floated the Colorado River through the Grand Canyon several times, and he had fallen in love with the scenery, the serenity, the wildness, the craziness of the river, and all that grew along the side. He had floated that river several times since he and David Brower had stopped a dam from being built in Colorado, which would have flooded a national monument. That was a compromise that David Brower had accepted, and he deeply regretted it now. The dam would not be built on the upper Colorado River if no protests were made over any other dam project built in the lower Colorado River. David could not stand by that agreement now. No way. The debate in the Sierra Club meeting raged for an hour and a half. The final vote was, yes, the Sierra Club would oppose the dam building in the national park. And thus the battle began. The first action was that the bulletin that the Sierra Club sent out to all of its members had an article by Martin Litton, and it encouraged the members to please read and write to their congressman and oppose the dam building. And then he took another river float through the Colorado with a friend, and he snapped pictures of the places that would be covered by the reservoirs, probably as well as all the other beautiful sites too. Then they went back and they published a book, and they sent it to all the different congressmen, Time and the River Flowing, to the congressmen and to many of the news outlets. Life, Newsweek, and Outdoor Life all published articles not supporting the two dams, saying they should not be built. Letters began flowing into the congressman's office. Udall got a lot of letters. They were delivered to Congressman, Secretary Udall, and President Lyndon Johnson. Avalanches of mail went to them. And then David Brower found some other experts that would review the report that the Bureau of Land Management had put together, talking about when they could get repayment for the dams that they built. They found so many discrepancies and so many wrong figures, and that got published. You couldn't believe their figures. The next action were full-page ads that went out in the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Chronicle, and the San Francisco Times. And on that full-page ad, it said, "Only you can prevent the Grand Canyon from being flooded. The national park belongs to all Americans. Write your congressman now and say no to these dams." No one will really admit what happened next. No. The IRS got involved, and it discredited the Sierra Club for being in violation of the tax exempt laws. Who got them involved? No one would confess. But the public didn't like what they heard at all. And they said, the IRS, the government, is attempting to strong-arm a group of conservationists who are trying to save the Grand Canyon. 20,000 more letters poured into Udall's office. Letters arrived by dump trucks and loaded into the congressman's offices. And lastly, anybody remember My Weekly Reader? I got it when I was in elementary school. They had an article about the Grand Canyon dams, and the elementary school children wrote their letters to. And those hundreds of thousands of letters from those school children went to their congressmen. And they said, don't build the dams in the Grand Canyon. Mailbags stuffed with these thousands of letters from children got delivered. Oh, a compromise was offered. We will only build one dam. Yeah, just one dam in the Grand Canyon. Sierra Club answered, one bullet in the heart is just as deadly as two. In 1968, the bill was passed, and the final version did not include two dams in the Grand Canyon. From 1963 till 1968, this was fought and argued. Aren't we glad today that there are not dams in the Grand Canyon? If you want to go swimming, you must swim in the Colorado River. No reservoirs are available. Thank you to David Brower, Martin Litton, the Sierra Club, and hundreds of thousands of letter writers for keeping the Grand Canyon grand. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaye. Wonderful, inspiring story.
Good. Thank you.
Professional storytellers, many experienced storytellers, some are even college professors in communication and storytelling, and learn how to fine-tune those stories, or just listen and understand better what goes behind putting together a story and communicating it. And now I can go back and use some of those skills to put this story together and be able to share it over the next couple of weeks a couple times. And we, again, are very thankful for these storytellers that have stepped forward, representing their guilds and helping us celebrate storytelling. Our next storyteller is Regina Stone Matthews from the North 40 Guild. Regina Stone Matthews is an award-winning author with 19 published books. She is a member of the North 40 Storytellers Guild and the Rockwall Christian Writers Group. Regina founded the Facebook group Kids Inspiring Kids, whose purpose is to showcase extraordinary kids, those who go over and beyond the call of duty and do it gladly with a generous heart. Regina was born in Columbia, South Carolina. She and her husband David moved from Marietta, Georgia to Richardson, Texas in 1992, where they have lived since that time. Regina has 3 daughters, 6 grandchildren, and 1 great-grandchild. The North 40 Storytellers Guild selected her as their rising star to tell at the concert in Denton in 2017. Creating and telling stories has been a passion of Regina's since childhood. Today she tells a funny tale, and the title is Kids Are Dirty, Rotten Liars. Regina Stone Matthews.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me. So I love this story about my kids, and I hope you will too, and I hope it will give you a chuckle. So anyone who has children knows this one fact. Kids are dirty, rotten liars. I have 3 daughters, so I will present them case 1, 2, and 3. My oldest daughter, Sandy was a terrible liar. Not that she went around telling, horrible lies. She just told all kinds of lies. And she never thought the lie through from the beginning to the end. So when my kids were growing up, I worked full time. So on the weekends, I would make chocolate chip cookies for them. Now, Sandy was a chocoholic, is a chocoholic. And so one Saturday, I had purchased the chocolate chips and put them in the refrigerator. And I went to the refrigerator to get the chocolate chips, but I didn't see them. And way in the back of the refrigerator was the bag of chocolate chips, although it didn't look like that looked when I purchased them. It was flat. So I reached in and I got them. And on each corner of the bag was one lone chocolate chip. Now, it didn't take a genius to figure out who had eaten these chocolate chips. And so I called the little creep from down upstairs and I said, Sandy. Yes, Mom. Come downstairs, please. And here she comes bounding down the stairs, all cute face and everything. And I'm standing there holding the empty bag of chocolate chips. And she looks at me and she says, well, I didn't eat them. And I'm saying, yes, well, are you sure? Oh, Mom, I'm sure I didn't eat them. Then came the tell. Are you sure you didn't eat them? Mom, I know in my heart I'm telling the truth. Okay. And you understand what happens in this family when you don't tell the truth. Mom, I know in my heart I'm telling the truth. All right. Close your eyes. And so she closed her eyes and I took her by the shoulders and I walked her into the powder room and I stood her in front of the mirror and I said, now, open your eyes. And all around her mouth was chocolate. Dirty, rotten liar. Case in point number 2. My middle child, Noelle. Now, Noelle was a professional liar. I mean, this kid would tell a lie and build it from the ground up. And it included plumbing and electrical work. And if you did not listen to this child as she was telling the lie, you would fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Now, Noelle had to have glasses. And we know how kids can be. They can be mean when kids are wearing glasses. And so in order to make this a pleasant thing for Noelle, we said, look, we're going to make this a family outing. We'll go to lunch. We'll go to the glasses store. And you can pick out any pair of glasses that you like. So we go to the glasses store and Noelle picks out probably the most expensive pair of glasses there, but we had said we would do this. She picked out a bright red pair of glasses. She looked like Sally Jesse Raphael. But she was happy. And we said to her, these are expensive glasses. Do not wear them at recess because if you break these glasses, you will clean your sister's room for eternity. So she had these glasses for probably a week and they broke. She broke them. So she comes to us and begins the lie. Now, there was a boy at her school who was a bully, but only to girls because he was a coward. And so he had been bullying and picking at Noelle for the entire school year. So she took this opportunity to get back at this kid. And so she says, Mom, Dad, I was playing Foursquare And he just came up and he grabbed the ball out of my hand and he busted me right in the face with it. My glasses flew off my face and went straight down to the ground and broke. It wasn't my fault. And so we believed her because we knew about this boy. We knew he had this history. So we took it to the teacher. We weren't really satisfied. My husband particularly was not satisfied. We took it all the way to the principal. Now, this boy, because of his history, was just about ready to get suspended. Fortunately for him, unfortunately for Noel, another teacher had seen him on the other side of the playground. Dirty, rotten little liar. Case in point number 3, my youngest daughter, Ashley. Now, Ashley had grown up with these other people, and she saw what had happened to them for lying. Now, that didn't mean that Ashley didn't lie. Of course she lied, but her lies were like silly little lies. And we would say to her, Ashley, are you lying? And she would go, and so I say to you all, although these people are cute, and they really are cute, they come to us precious. But as adults, we must be prepared to deal with these specific situations. And we must understand, when all is said and done, kids are dirty, rotten liars. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Regina. That was wonderful.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Our next storyteller is Viveca Deans from the Rockwall Guild. Viveca has always enjoyed stories, music, rhythm, and rhyme. She developed a desire for telling stories while attending children's story time with her children at the local library. Upon attending her first storytelling festival, she realized she had found her tribe. She tells personal, family-friendly stories about family and faith in hope and love of Jesus Christ. She has shared stories at area libraries, Tejas Storytelling Festivals, Children's Story Slam with her children, Artists Standing Strong Together, ASST, 6th TGIF, Family Story Fest, and holiday celebrations. She serves on the tech support team at various Tejas Storytelling Association events, including virtual workshops. She's a founding member of the Rockwall Storytelling Guild and a current member of the Tejas Storytelling Association. With her story today, titled Sweet Jesus, help me bring up Viveca Deans.
Thank you. 'Tis so sweet to trust Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, and to know thus saith the Lord. It was April, the second Wednesday of April 2016. It was like any other second Wednesday of the month. I was going about my normal schedule, going to the Master Gardener meeting, and my husband had left to go to his job. A few minutes after I got to the meeting, though, my phone rang and it was my husband calling. Well, he knows I have this meeting, so I dismissed the call that I would call later. Less than a minute after that, I get a text message from him saying, I'm out of work. The sound that the gastric juices made in my stomach should have disrupted the meeting, but nobody seemed to actually hear them. We went on through the meeting. When I got back to the house, we began to talking with the children about the fact that two things needed to change. We were going to have to scale back on some of the things that we normally do. And they needed to understand that even though their dad was at the house, that he was at work, finding work. His full-time job had become looking for employment. We made it through the rest of April, really thinking that this might last about 3 months at most. But we made it through the rest of April. And then May and June, July, August, September, October, and the beginning of November. I had an errand that day, that early morning in November. And by this time, on the way back to our house, I was running on fumes. I'm pretty sure. I'm one of those people that it's in the needle's in the red, but I know my vehicle. And so I kept driving, but I drove to the local store where we normally get our fuel. And this store requires you to have a gift card to use at the pump if you're not paying with your debit card. So that meant I had to go inside, get the card, and then go out to the pump. Well, when I got to the register and I'm counting my money out, initially I decided I was only going to pay with the paper money because I really didn't want to have to go through $3 worth of change. But at the last minute, I decided, no, I'm going to put the full $10 on this card. It turns out that store requires that as a minimum to get the gift card. So it was a good thing I made that decision. Got my card, got back in the vehicle, and drove back out to the pump. Well, when I got to the pump, this was my first time purchasing gas this way. So, operator error, I tried a few times scanning the card or trying to follow the pump prompts on the pump, but it didn't seem to be working. Just about the time that someone had come to help me, one of the employees that sits in the little booth out by the pumps came to help me. I got it going and started pumping, and someone else that was dressed like the employees with his red shirt and khakis came between the pumps and approached me, and he said, "Do you need some help?" And I said, "No, looks like we got it now." And he looked back at the pump and he said, "Well, $10 isn't going to get you very far." I said, "I'm going straight to my house. It'll get me where I need to go." He said, "Well, if you don't mind, I'd like to add to that." I realized I was the subject of one of those random acts of kindness. And to be honest, my knee-jerk reaction was to say no. And he saw my hesitation and he said, "Please, I'd like to do this." And in the midst of my having the thought about a random act of kindness, he mentioned it. You know, sometimes you just do these random acts of kindness, and I relented and allowed him to pump the gas. And then I started talking about how sometimes these random acts of kindness really aren't about the people that are involved, neither the donor nor the recipient. Because sometimes so many people who are watching it play out get inspired by it. So I agreed to let him do it. Well, He's pumping, we're talking, just kind of having a chat, even about how you never know who's watching. And then the pump stops. And he looks at it and he says, "Oh, I was planning to put $30 in, but I think it stopped at something like maybe $23.46. He said, "Well, will you just let me top it off? I just have that thing where I just like for things to end evenly." In fact, I've even told my wife that if she ever sees a charge on the debit card or on the bank statement that doesn't end in 50 or two zeros, to call the police. I'm in trouble. So we laughed about that they had this kind of inside joke. And after he finished topping it off, he closed the gas tank on my vehicle. He hung up the hose, and I expected to see him go back to the little booth on the other side of the fuel island where the employees hang out, especially when it's hot or extremely cold. But he didn't. He walked away from me and walked over to this sports car that was parked at the edge of that fuel island. So I stood there for a few seconds trying to figure out what just happened. I was certain that he was an employee. He was dressed in red and khakis like the rest. Did he just get off work? And where did that car come? When did it even get there? Because he came from a totally different direction. So I'm really puzzled by what happened. And then a memory in our discussion comes back to mind. I saw you counting out your change in the store. He was the guy in the line behind me when I was getting my gift card. About that moment, I was just undone. And I needed to get my composure to get back in the vehicle because our children were sitting inside the vehicle. Just before I opened the door, I heard the Holy Spirit say, "I did that for you." Just when you were concerned about how you would make ends meet, he just let me know that I'll send somebody to the pump just for you. I'm telling you, I was almost a basket case, but I pulled myself together, kind of dried my eyes, and I climbed into the driver's seat. Our children were sitting in the second row of the van. Our daughter, typical teenager, I said, "Did you see what just happened?" She did an eye roll and, "Yeah, he pumped your gas." And I said, "No, except for the $10 that I put in, he filled the tank." 'Tis so sweet to trust Jesus, just to take him at his word, just to rest upon his promise, and to know, thus saith the Lord, Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I prove him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more.
Thank you, Viveca. A wonderful, inspiring story. Our next teller is Tom Heydman from the Guild of the San Antonio Storytellers Association, or SASA. Storyteller Tom Heydman is a retired college and university professor who tells myths, fairy tales, and personal stories combined with original songs performed with his guitar. He lives in San Antonio, Texas, with his wife, artist Dixie Lee. Today he shares a humorous and poignant story entitled Days Gone By. Tom Heydman.
Hey, thank you, John. You know, when I was growing up, I was a very lucky kid because I got to spend a lot of time on my grandparents' little farm just north of the Cimarron River and near the little town of Ripley, Oklahoma. And my grandparents lived a simple life. They had to make do with 6 milk cows, a big vegetable garden with some fruit trees, and many, many chickens. And they did have an old tractor that they used to plant, grow, and harvest feed for the animals, oats, corn, and alfalfa. Now, their closest neighbor was a widower named Homer Shotwell. Homer lived in a big old 2-story unpainted house and just about a mile north of my grandparents' house. And soon after his wife passed away, my grandmother invited Homer to come and share the noonday meal with us. And the next day he did. And she invited him to come the next day. And he came, and she invited him again. And it became a ritual. Every day around noon, here comes Homer walking down that dirt road, and we'd all sit down and have a big bowl of vegetable soup that my grandmother made from her garden. Sometimes, if we were lucky, there was a little leftover chicken in it. And she had biscuits hot right out of the oven. And for dessert, we'd have a slice of either apple or strawberry rhubarb pie. Now, Homer was my granddad's best friend. He was like my granddad. He was a soft-spoken, very kind man. And he and my granddad shared a love for 3 things. 1, farming and helping each other out when they needed to. And 2nd, the game of cribbage. That's a card game. And 3rd, they both loved the fine art of storytelling. So every day after that noon meal, Granddad and Homer would go sit down and begin playing cribbage. And there I was, just a little kid, and I'd watch them because they'd carry on a conversation while they were playing. And carrying on a conversation, usually that meant there was going to be a story or 2. For example, one day, Granddad said to me, "Grandson, have you ever heard the story about how Homer taught the guy from the city how to tell time?" I shook my head. I said, "No." So Granddad told the story. He said, "Well, the story was that early evening or late afternoon, Homer was doing the evening milking. And this fellow pulled into their driveway, and he could see through the open door of the barn, see Homer sitting on his milk stool milking that cow. And he stopped. He didn't want to go too far to look like he was being aggressive. And he gets out of his car, and he goes up and he says, "Excuse me, sir." He said, "But I wonder if you could help me." He said, "You see, I was on my way over here on Highway 36 going from Guthrie over to Cushing, and I stopped to see your little town of Ripley. And I crossed over a bridge, and there was a bunch of winding roads, and all of a sudden here I am, I'm lost, and I wonder if you could help me get back to the main highway." Homer said, "Of course." He gets up and he walked outside the barn and he gave the guy the instructions. Turned around, went back, sat down, continued his milking. Now the city fella starts for his car, and he got to his car and he notices that his watch had stopped. So he turns back around and he goes back and he says, "Excuse me, sir, I hate to bother you again, but my watch stopped. I wonder if you could tell me the time." Homer said, "Sure." And Homer leaned forward and he held that cow's teat in his right hand. And by the way, that is the proper pronunciation. And he put his left hand on that cow's udder. And he pushed up a little bit, and then he tilted his head until he leaned over until his ear was touching that cow's udder. And then he straightened back up and he said, "Yes, sir." He said, "It's 5:45. And the city guy said, "Oh, thank you very much." And then he started back for his car, but he only got about halfway, and curiosity overcame him. And he turned back and he goes back and he said, "Excuse me, sir." He said, "I've never seen anything like that." He said, "How do you do it? How can you tell time like that?" And Homer said, "Oh, that's easy." He said, "Anybody can do it. You want to give it a try?" The city fellow said, "Sure." Homer said, "Sit right here on this milk stool. Now lean forward. You got to hold that cow's teat with your right hand and put your left hand on his udder and tilt your head over and go till your ear touches that udder. And now push up just a little bit." And when he did, you could see under that cow and across the barn, and there on the wall was an old pendulum clock that said 5:45. You know, I learned a lot about love on that on my visit. That was my little farm, my grandparents' farm. Love of friends and neighbors, and the love of family, and love of the fine art of storytelling. And I learned a lot about love between a man and a woman just by watching and listening to my granddad and my grandmother. See, they worked that little farm every day until they were in their 90s, but it never looked like work. It always looked like play. It just looked like two kids in love having fun, because it didn't make any difference whether they were milking cows, feeding chickens, or canning vegetables and fruit for the winter, or just pulling weeds. They always found some time for a hug and a kiss for no particular reason whatsoever. Oh, and I remember sometimes on a hot summer afternoon, I would watch them walk down this path down to the little cool water creek that ran through their property, where they'd go fishing or skinny dipping. But no matter where they went, they always held hands. And just watching and listening to my granddad and grandmother, I learned this. And that is that love and passion do not die of old age. Now, the last time I visited that little farm was a few days after my granddad passed away. And on that day, friends and family, neighbors gathered in that little farmhouse. And we told stories, some of his favorite stories, and oh my goodness, we laughed. We laughed and we cried. And then we sang some of his favorite songs, some country songs, some pop songs, a couple of my songs. And we sang Amazing Grace. And we cried. We celebrated his life and we mourned his death. And we ended that day when my grandmother asked me to recite a poem that she had written for him several years before. Now, she always called him my darling, my darling. And she wrote this poem, and I added 3 chords. And she wrote this poem in the form of a letter to him. My darling, love is the reason for our journey. There's no beginning and there's no end. We've been here many times before, and we'll be here once again. I love you. I love you. When I look in your eyes, I only see love. All beauty looking back at me. Just a boy and a girl in love with the world, believing in destiny. I love you. I love you. We have always been together through many lifetimes, this we know. Always moving in a circle, round and around is the way we go. I love you. I love you. Back to you, John.
All right, thank you, Tom. We love the heartfelt music and poetry that you share. Our next teller is Chisom Ogoke from the Dallas Storytelling Guild. From listening to lines of her parents' mother tongue to crafting her own tales, Chisom continually discovers her voice through story. She is a recipient of the 2025 J.J. Renault Storytelling Mentorship Grant, which has given her the honor to study, craft, and tradition under master storyteller Diane Mclaughlin. Along her storytelling journey, she has been a teller at the Tejas Storytelling Festival, the Fringe Performer for National Storytelling Network Conference, and a participant of the Wilmington Black Storytelling Residency, WBSR. She is grateful to her mentor, WBSR, ASST, and her people, the Dallas Storytelling Guild, for helping her grow into the teller she is today. With a funny and serious story, help me welcome with her tale entitled Little Poto, Chisom Ogoke.
Thank you all. All right. Now, for little Pato, life was good. And for those of you who don't know what a Pato is, P-O-T-T-O, I want you to think of a miniature-sized bear with round ears, round eyes, a lemur-like face, and the most interesting hands you had ever seen, with a stump of an index finger and a very strong thumb meant for gripping and climbing. Little Pato's life was good because he had everything he could ever need. When it came to food, well, it was year-round, tree gum in the dry season, fruits and bugs in the wet. When it came to travel, well, all he had to do was cling on to his mother's back. But on top of all of this, he and his mother lived in the canopies of the rainforest. I'm talking way too high above the ground to be snatched by the predators below, and way too hidden by leaves and trees to be spotted by the birds above. I'm talking life was good. That was until little Pato woke up from his daytime slumber. And did I tell you these were nocturnal creatures? Active mostly during the night, sleep during the day. Well, when little Pato woke up, well, he was looking about left and right and realized he was hungry. And he and his mother slept in a small tree hollow, and across from that tree on a branch right above it was a juicy looking mango, hanging right down within reach. Now little Pato, he left his mother's side and moseyed on over on the branch they were sleeping on to where that mango was dangling above it. And he reached up with one hand to grab at it. And then he tried to use both hands. And he lifted up a foot and trees, branches, leaves were everywhere. Until finally, little Pato landed on a branch himself. He fell through the canopy. And when he was able to reorient himself on that branch, he looked down and saw the most interesting thing he had ever seen. All green and brown. It was the rain forest floor. Little Pato was a long way from home, and there's nothing left to do except to climb back up. So he started climbing. And of course, this event didn't go unnoticed. Brother Leopard, he was nearby and he heard something rustling. So he came over, he looked left, he looked right, and he looked up and saw a Pato. And Brother Leopard, well, he had eaten many a good animal before, but he had never had Pato. So he got to thinking how he can get that Pato inside of his belly. He circled that tree once, twice, and a third time till he came to an idea. And when he had one, he said ever so sweetly beneath that tree, little Pato, won't you come down to play? The canopy's a long way up and I got a place to stay. Now little Pato, he heard this and he looked down and saw the most interesting animal he had ever seen with spots all over. Oh, but he also remembered. His mother told him never to talk to strangers, especially the kind with claws and fangs and that were licking their lips all over. No. So little Pato, he kept on moving. Now Patos climb and move very, very slowly. So Brother Leopard, he had time to think of another idea. He circled that tree once, twice, and a third time until finally he said a bit more firmly, little Pato, won't you come down to play? There's nothing up there for you now that you have lost your way. No, little Pato, he heard this, but he remembered that his mother was still up there. He didn't see her fall, so of course she would want to see him again. So little Pato, he kept on moving. At this point, Brother Leopard, his stomach was howling and growling, making all kinds of noises. And when Brother Leopard was hungry, oh, he was very, very angry. Especially when his prey was trying to get away from him. Oh, no, he got very testy. And, of course, where else would this baby boy be trying to get to? Oh, he circled that tree once, twice, and a third time, and he snapped and said, little Pato, where you going anyway? Your mother had already gone and left since you had lost your way. Ah, for little Pato, this cut to the heart. All of a sudden he realized it was his fault that he left his mother's side. His fault that he fell through the canopy, and his fault that he was facing this leopard now. And when Patos are scared, everybody, they freeze. And little Pato, he didn't know whether to go up or down. So he just clung to the tree. And as he clung to the tree, he heard a small voice coming from it. Keep moving. Keep moving. It was the tree. And Patos were good friends with trees. And this tree had seen everything. He saw little Pato fall through the canopy. It also saw little Pato land on one of its branches and what Brother Leopard was trying to do. And the tree didn't like what Brother Leopard was trying to do. And it knew where little Pato's mother was. So ever so softly said, keep moving. And this was enough for little Pato to put one small hand above the other, another above the other, above the other, till he was climbing again. Slowly but surely, making his way up until eventually he left Brother Leopard. And while listening to the tree and its message, he learned that he was a little bit too hard on himself. And he especially learned never to lose sight of his destination, so that eventually he was able to make it back up to the canopy and see his mother again, just as he had left her, asleep. And as he moseyed back into her side, his mother stretched and yawned and said, "Little Pato, are you just coming back in?" And little Pato told her everything. How he had fell through the canopy, engaged with the leopard, and had to climb all the way back up. More importantly, he told her the lesson he had received from the tree. That became clearer and clearer the closer he got to home. Little Pato, keep moving when you're afraid. No matter where life takes you, to get lost is to learn the way. Thank you.
Thank you, Chisom. That was wonderful. So many wonderful tellers today. And let's all put our hands together again and applause our tellers. Can we get the gallery view, Emily? Emily Brock is our other technical host tonight and co-host. Appreciate her support. We had David Thompson, Jaye Mclaughlin, Regina Stone Matthews, Sara Evans, Warren Holleman, Viveca Deans, Tom Heydman, and Chisom Ogoke. Now we hope to see you at one of our other guild events. Maybe one day we can see each other face to face, as there are some guilds that meet in person. So you could check out at the TejasStorytelling.com and find one near you. Otherwise, we'll meet again on Zoom. On Monday evening at 6:30, we do have Story Circle, where people can come practice their story, get a little bit of feedback, and just enjoy listening to wonderful stories in development, or maybe it's even a well-told story. So until our next event, thank you much for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Great job, everyone.